Good afternoon, everyone from Los Angeles, California. I'm Dr. Alexandra Katehakis, Clinical Director at the Center for Healthy Sex. And today our topic from Mirror of Intimacy is Eros. And I chose Eros not because it's today's entry, but because I think it's a really interesting topic for us to consider, since it is something that's embedded in mythology and a word that we hear often on in different forums all the time. So our quote today is from Dr. Sigmund Freud, who said, "Civilization is a process in the service of Eros, where purpose is to combine single human individuals, and after that families, then races, peoples, and nations into one great unity, the unity of mankind. Why this has to happen, we do not know. The work of Eros is precisely this." And I think this is a powerful quotation, especially given the time we're living in right now, where there's so much disunity and disharmony and otherness. And here Freud is talking to us about how crucial Eros is to civilization, that without this combining of a single human consciousness, a single human awareness of all races and peoples and nations, we will tear each other asunder. And so I would say that Eros is gravely missing from our culture today. And it's important to think about, how the Greeks talked about and thought about Eros. They thought about it as this principal force uniting the universe, which is what Freud was pointing to. And Eros designates intimate love. It's also one of the main Greek gods. It's known to us by way of the Romans as Cupid, who's a sort of cherubic character with wings on him that flies around and sort of touches people until they're smitten with love. But in other places, or in other ways of thinking, Eros is a primordial creation god. And he is preceding humanity, literally binding the world together through erotic love. And when we think about erotic love as a force of nature, as something that binds us to our humanity, it's not just the singular love of another human being or the, excitatory orgasm and arousal that comes from that union, but it's a binding to our humanity. We feel more human. We feel more alive. We feel more connected to our gender identity when we make love with another. But that is a fractal, if you will. It is recursive. It connects to everything in the universe at all time. And our culture has a tendency to be reductive. That if you think about two people involved in intercourse or coitus, it's reduced to those two people having sex. And at its most base, it can be constructed as pornographic, as opposed to seeing this broad macro picture that it is the consort of two people that are bringing this energy alive between the two of them that reverberates into our daily lives, the way that we treat perhaps our children, our neighbor, our friends, our coworkers. We're in a better mood if we've made love. And that then can expand out into the universe as well. And so this idea of Eros being a unifying force for civilization is a theme I want to keep coming back to and for everyone to think about. So this is thought of, this Eros principle is thought of as a drive for wholeness that ranges from the personal to these universal levels of experience and expression. And there's a classic tale that many of you probably learned either in high school or college about Eros and Psyche. And Eros, of course, is this invisible love force, this erotic force that comes to us at night under the cloak of darkness. And Psyche was immortal. And on the condition that she would never lay eyes on Eros, she would never see Eros, he would come to her and he would fly away at daybreak. So oftentimes we think of the erotic coming in the evening, in the dark of night. But I think this is a drama that symbolizes our tendency to relegate the erotic to the darkness, that it's an isolated encounter that we steal away, and we're stealing away our awareness in that moment, only to bring it back to full alertness or awareness. But the ultimate union of Eros and Psyche, of this esoteric love that comes to us that we cannot see, and psyche being the more psychological, the more conscious, if you will, represents our capacity for love and intimacy, and combining that or integrating it with our own waking consciousness. And so think about that also, that these are two different aspects, the conscious and the unconscious, what we see, what we don't see. We could say the relative and the quantum or the implicate, that there are two different sources of energy going on at all times. And our tendency in our culture is to only believe what we can see, what we can measure, what we can feel, what feels concrete to us. And we tend to discount the unconscious, the intuitive, that which comes from a place that we can't always put our finger on or see, but we know deeply, we can feel it in our bodies. So this idea that our deepest desire, which is Eros, originates from our deepest self, which is our consciousness, is raised to higher and higher levels when we experience it through pleasure. And that pleasure brings us a source of enlightenment. So I'm looking at my screen here to see if anybody has any questions. And thus far, I don't see any. But if you have any questions, feel free to type them either to Melisa, and then she'll report them to me. Or I think you can put them in the question and answer box. So another aspect of this is anteros, which is the brother of Eros. And he was born solely to drive Eros onward. It was a sibling rivalry, if you will. So anteros was the antidote or the opposite of Eros. And this was, sort of egging Eros on to fulfill this adult sexuality. And sometimes he was called the god of slighted love, Anteros was. He was punishing, sometimes feeling bitter, resentful, fearful, and covetous in human relationships. So ask yourself whether you tend to let Eros or Anteros rule your love life. Do you often feel slighted or like something's wrong or something terrible is going to happen to you because you don't see love or Eros coming to you as a form of an integrated self? So there's a question here saying, recently I have overcome sexual difficulties that have been wrapped up in post-traumatic stress disorder. Our sex has been so freeing and nice. Eros lovemaking is new to me and my husband. We are an older couple. Do you have any suggestions on how to maintain this experience? And do you think desiring this at our age is silly? Well, the answer to your last question is no. I don't think it's silly at all. In fact, I think this contacting of Eros requires a maturity. It requires a deep understanding that love and making love and giving and receiving love begins and ends with us. No one else is going to bring us that happiness or orgasm or deep desirous experience unless we are free and unshackled from our shame, our trauma, and our distorted ideas about pleasure and love. And I would suggest that whatever you're doing now, that you look at what you're doing now and ask yourself, well, how do we build on that? It's often good to examine what's working well so you can do more of it, not just at what the problem is all the time. And so whatever this free, unfettered feeling is in you, this abandon, if you will, this merging of the unknown with the known is going to take you to these higher places of eroticism. And I think it's best for you to trust your own intuition and the experience that's coming between the two of you rather than collapsing it down by what I might say or a book might say. Would it be fair to think of Anteros as the shadow of Eros? Yeah, I suppose so. I think that's probably why it was constructed in that way, as the rival of Eros, the thing that steals that intimacy from us and pleasure because we collapse into bitterness or resentment or victimhood. As a gay man, there's a great deal of fluidity in playing around with erotic energies. In my heart of hearts, I would love to have one person in a monogamous but I'm also erotically excited about playing with others and small groups. Well, I think as long as you've chosen that particular way of having these experiences, and you're doing so in a way that's safe and consensual and sound, and certainly open if you are in a partnership, then that's your path. And you have to trust that. You just want to be mindful about also chasing something that's always giving you an experience that isn't necessarily grounded. And so this is a funny thing. This is a paradox where I was with a group of friends on Saturday evening, and it wasn't a large group, don't worry, and we were socially distanced. There were 5 of us total. And it's so much fun to get together with this group of people, and we laugh and talk, and I'm left with this feeling of, it feels like an oxytocin experience. I just feel deep love for them, for life, for myself, for my partner. And I always have a feeling like I want to do that again and again and again and again. But that chasing of holding on to any experience creates suffering. And this is a basic tenet of Buddhism, that suffering doesn't have to be painful. It can be greatly pleasurable if we attach to it, if we're trying to replicate it all the time. So I would caution you to enjoy this chasing of Eros, this experience, but not to make it a need or an addiction, if you will, to leave it in its right place and let it be. And if it comes around again, great. And if it's different next time, you've got to live with that also. So Lily writes, this is wonderful that you're talking about sexuality and eroticism in a positive way. There are a lot of therapists currently who have continued a judgment and punitive approach to sexuality, which has caused a great deal of additional shame and damage to patients. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. I think that sex is an infinitely interesting topic to explore. And when we really keep exploring it and honing it down, we start to recognize that it's just not that complicated. It's not dirty, it's not shameful. It's a function of our human bodies, just as being able to taste something really delicious or hear beautiful music. Like, what if those things were taken from us? So taking sensuality and sexuality from us and naming it dirty or bad or wrong or shameful is as criminal as saying that you shouldn't read a certain book or listen to certain kind of music because it's wrong somehow. So my invitation to you is to explore your sexuality. And when you bump up against anteros, when you bump up against shame, you're looking at your own trauma or the trauma of the culture or what people have told you. It is not the way your body was designed, or your psyche for that matter. Anna says, hi, do you think that attempting to pursue monogamous sexual experiences as the only emotionally safe or acceptable way has fed the grasping, insecure nature of anteros in our culture? I would love to embrace Eros more completely and wonder if trying to find attachment and Eros together is leading me to more suffering or less. That's a really great and complex question. I think we can find Eros in everything. And that's part of what we see in the erotic art in the ancient world. We see that the heroes all exchange signs of respect and love and affection for each other, often of a very deep nature that wasn't necessarily named homosexual or bad or dirty. So for example, in Sparta and Crete in ancient Greece, young men were initiated into the art of war and the trained use of arms by a lover, and often an adult male that was a lover. And that was not thought of as dirty or wrong or even particularly sexual per se. It was part of the initiation of the art of war. And so Eros and pleasure was intimately linked to nature in Greek mythology. And now I know we're not living in ancient times and we're more evolved and we're less primitive perhaps in those ways. But to think about Eros being this kind of profound need to experience emotion and sensation, and to see it as a privilege in all aspects of our lives is the invitation of Eros, and really the tantric invitation also. So to ask your question about suffering within a monogamous relationship, I don't think that's accurate. I think we can experience deep and profound love and high levels of eroticism in a monogamous relationship in the same way that we can experience deep and profound love in our workday or as we're walking down the street, when we just fall in love with a beautiful tree or the gorgeousness of the day. There's a monogamy and a fidelity there, just seeing the beauty in life, just seeing our planet, not thinking, well, we can just get rid of this planet and go to Mars. No, this is the one and only planet we have, the one and only lover we have. And so how do we dive deeply into that? And that is not the experience for everyone. I think if you were to, you're saying, can I find attachment and eros together? Does that lead me to suffering? Or should I embrace it more clearly and perhaps have many lovers? Well, that's only a question that you can answer by making that experiment and seeing, does many lovers lead to great experiences, or does it lead to suffering? Or is it good for a period of time? That's the other thing. There are certain phases in our lives, dare I say youth, when we're sort of freer and more fluid and less desirous of being tied to one person. And our bodies and our spirits and our psyches can tolerate that. In fact, we prefer it. But then there is a point where I think as we age, and I don't think this is just some cultural construction, I really don't, because I'm quite a contrarian in a lot of ways. And people would tell me, I remember when I was, like in my late 30s or early 40s, and women in their late 40s or early 50s would say to me, just wait till you get to be my age. And I think, oh my God, that's not happening to me. And sure enough, their predictions, despite my not being open to them, have come true for me in my way. And so what I'm proposing is what this other question was that came to me initially, that this woman is saying that she says, Eros lovemaking is new to me and my husband. We're an older couple. And so she's saying sex has been so freeing and nice. And I think that as we age, we feel safer with one partner. We feel like we can actually go deeper because we're not having to negotiate different personalities or different locations we might end up in. If we're traveling and having sex in different, beautiful places, not that anyone's getting to do that so much right now, but there's a wandering quality in our youth and a desire for exploration that becomes increasingly, I think, a desire for safety and even bodily safety as we age. So keep in mind what season of life you're in and what's appropriate for you at this time. And someone says, I'm a recovering sex addict and my wife is recovering from betrayal trauma. When and how should we be reintroducing ourselves to a new healthy sexual relationship? Well, that depends again on the level of trust that's been established between the two of you. Where are you in that process of rebuilding? And when do both of you decide that you want to take this leap of faith into the sexual again? And I think you have to wade into this very slowly because safety is key for trust. Without safety, you cannot have trust. Safety is sort of a container. Like we can both, even if you've had betrayal trauma and you're in recovery, you can both perhaps agree that you feel safe in your home. That might be easy for you to say, yes, we're safe here. We like it here. We don't feel like anything bad happened here. But trust is more of a kind of moment-to-moment negotiation with another. We can go in and out of feeling trust with another when trust has been broken by betrayal trauma. So it's going to be incumbent upon you to really track that trust, to pay attention to what's happening with your partner and in your own body as you wade into sex. And I would suggest that you take it slowly, that you consider even, looking at the tenets in erotic intelligence, which walk people through sexuality in a very slow and easy way. So here's a question. I'm a sex and love addict in recovery. With my sponsor, I'm exploring healthy sexual relationships with men, not attracted to love, or relationship, since a part of my disease is severe sexual anorexia. Any advice on how to create eroticism around this process, which right now feels very cut and dried, a bit boring and transactional? Well, I would expect that from you if you are sexually anorexic. I would expect that sensuality in your everyday life might be something that you don't pay too much attention to. So I would direct you to look at Patrick Carnes' book, Sexual Anorexia, where he really directs people to get very granular with the most simple sensual things in life. And so for you to leap right into a relationship with someone that you're not even interested in because you're not attracted to it could be very hurtful or difficult for you. So start by going to a farmer's market, if you have them where you live. We have them in plethora in Southern California. And feel the sun on your face as you're shopping. Smell the vegetables, touch them. Buy clothing or wear something that feels good to you, or you like the fabric on your arm or the way the fabric feels on your legs. Do things that are sensual to the touch, to the taste. Use sensual oils or perfumes. Things that bring you into your body in a way that start to enliven and awaken the Eros in you. Because just looking for it outside is way too cut and dried. And I would think that's probably way too big of a move for you at this point. So in looking at Eros again, and also you see this predominantly in the world of sexuality, and I would invite you to look at any kind of erotic drawings you can find from the ancient mythological period. You'll see they're quite explicit. It's not just the Hindus who predate the Greeks who have the Kama Sutra. You see a lot of phalluses in the Greek and Roman drawings and painting because they represented fertility and fecundity and life and earth and the harvest. They're not just these pornographic images that were there to seduce people, that the sexual union between the gods themselves was seen as the continuity of life and the continuation of the fertility of the earth. It was considered a sacred phenomenon. And there was an independence between man and nature, or woman and nature, an interdependence, I would say. And isn't that what we're up against now with climate deniers and not recognizing that, yes, perhaps the earth is heating up because that's just what it does cyclically, but certainly human beings are accelerating that with all of the greenhouse gases and pollution that we put into the planet and into our air. And so if we cannot see the sacredness, the interconnectedness between us and our planet, we will kill it the way that we kill our own selves in many ways. So looking at this sort of hand-in-hand cycle that we all feel independently with the earth, and we feel with our partners, and sometimes we're in sync and sometimes we're not, excuse me, is all a way of looking at Eros. And so think about these mythical love stories. You know, one that's famous was Aphrodite and Adonis. And Adonis was the symbol of sexual potency. And we still use that word when we think about, oh, he's so gorgeous, he's an Adonis. That's the male archetype of potency. And Aphrodite was, you know, the goddess of love. And he died during a wild boar hunt because he was vainly trying to hide. And he couldn't really hide because the nature for the Greeks was that his hiding became a form of impotence, that he could not escape his fate, if you will. And this significance is about sexual pleasure also, that he killed his sexual pleasure because he wasn't stepping into his virility, if you will. And so this becomes a symbol of impotence for all of us when we hide our sexuality, when we hide our strength, who we really are, we wither, essentially. And that's what the myth of Adonis is about, that we shouldn't wither, we shouldn't hide out. So this wider conception of the Greeks about nature and sexuality and sensuality is about having a body and a soul, and that we form together and in relation to each other when we are in sexual consort with each other. So I wonder if anybody has any questions about any of that thus far. So think about then, someone said, asking about anteros again. Well, I was saying that anteros and eros were siblings, and they were set up as siblings to have sibling rivalry. And eros is what we know as love and pleasure and sexuality. And anteros was always complaining. He was always bitter. He was always resentful. Love didn't quite work out for him. And someone asked the question, well, would you say that's the shadow of Eros? And I said, yeah, that's probably a good way of looking at it also, that it is a shadow side of Eros. So let's see some of my notes here about well, I guess the point is that there are lots and lots of stories about love and myths that I would encourage you to look at. There are themes of titanic love and courtly love. The story of Peleus who won over the goddess of love, even though she was being desired by both Zeus and Poseidon. And Andromeda, her destiny was that she was going to be devoured by a dragon. And she was saved by Perseus. So there are all these epic experiences of being swallowed up by love, drowned by love, saved by love over and over again. And there's also plenty of homosexual love amongst the gods also. And bestiality as well. So you see the Greeks especially engaging with transsexuals. You see that with Achilles was also treated as a girl so he could flee the Greeks who wanted to take him to Troy. So you see cross-dressing in the Greek mythology. And so you see lots of iterations of sexual expression that are not considered aberrant or perverted or distorted in any way. And that also reminds us that sexual fluidity and expression has been around from the beginning of time, that it's not new to what's happening in our world today. We finally somehow have the freedom without the persecution that we had when the Dark Ages and Middle Ages rolled around, and even our 20th century American puritanical ideas. Finally, we're seeing this pansexuality, this sexual fluidity, these sexual experiences that people are talking about that I'm calling seasonal, that shift and change as we grow and change and experiment. We see them embedded in these ancient ideas. We even see that Eros was occupied in some ways as a superhuman or transcendent idealization of the erotic that I think we're more and more experiencing in our day-to-day lives and in our sexual lives as we let ourselves out of these puritanical ideas. Excuse me. So let's see, we have some questions here. Paul says, I'm wondering about the experience of Eros in oneself. Can a person experience the emotional sensuality within boundaries that preclude the physical expression of that sensuality with others, so that the emotion is an enrichment of life without crossing boundaries that one wishes to maintain? And I would say yes. I think that's what I was pointing to this woman that was talking about anorexia, that you can have great orgasmic experiences yourself as a form of cultivating an erotic charge. This would be more of a tantric practice also. Tantric practitioners talk about their own practice, a practice of breathing, of turning sensuality inward, of imagination, and not, again, fantasy, pornography, that sort of imagination, but ways of imagining light and energy moving up and down the chakras. Sensual touch, breath work, all of that creates an erotic charge internally for orgasm, which is a form of cultivating Eros in yourself. You can also cultivate it again through the five senses by way of simply, how you put yourself together on any given day. If there's a way that you like to have sort of a gentle waft of sandalwood that you smell. And this is not an overpowering perfume that makes everybody around you start coughing or sneezing because they're allergic, but something that you dab around your, your throat or behind your ear that only you can smell on occasion during the day that feels sensual or erotic to you. And that doesn't mean you're going to go run masturbate in a bathroom or have sex with someone. It's not reduced to the profane like that. It's really about your own sensuality. Again, your choice of clothes, what you eat, how you exercise, the way you feel about yourself, the way you shower or bathe. All of that is cultivating Eros inside of yourself, and it doesn't cross any boundaries whatsoever. And someone asks, do you have any suggestions about engaging with Eros as a single person, feeling particularly isolated from others due to the pandemic? Well, I hope I just answered that question, that you can make your sexuality a practice that does not include pornography. And not because I'm anti-porn or First Amendment or anything like that. I just think if we start to introduce pornography into this conversation, there is a danger for some that becomes the main event. And that is not Eros. That is a much more, I would say, first chakra base experience of sex and sexuality, because it's all about coming. It's all about ejaculation, orgasm, you name it. And it's about high stimulation to the brain so that you can get off. What I'm talking about is a full body experience. It's an interdependent experience with nature and with love itself. It's slower, it's more sensual. And that is something that if you cultivate with yourself, when you get together with a partner or a lover, you're bringing so much more to the lovemaking experience because you're already ignited inside. You're not expecting someone to help you get an erection or get lubricated so that you're ready. You already have a way of activating this experience of love and eros and eroticism inside you. And what a gift to bring to a lover, as opposed to this laziness of, well, you should do me or you should bring me to orgasm, right? It's a different way of looking at sex and sexuality altogether. And you have agency over it. You're not dependent on someone else. Any thoughts on the internalized disapproval of Eros and how it can play out in intimate relationships? Speaking from Catholic Ireland, well, my understanding is that the Catholics have sort of waned in Ireland. That doesn't mean that they don't leave a legacy of that. But I think you have to work to deconstruct those internalized disapprovals, because again, it's like, reaching for something delicious and you're slapping your own hand saying, don't eat that, it's bad, or you're going to get fat, or you're a horrible person. No one's imposing that on you but you. And so when we really get honest with ourselves about what we like sexually and sensually, what makes us happy, what lights us up, and we're unapologetic about it, that's when we could start to deconstruct Eros. And I can give you so many silly examples from my life, but I'll tell you that I'm a Libra, for whatever that means to any of you. And aesthetics and beauty are so important to my well-being. And I used to grapple with this, feeling like I was superficial, like I was materialistic. And I came to realize that there's something about aesthetics and beauty around me that makes me feel balanced internally. I feel good. It makes me smile. The smallest things make me happy. So for example, my husband brought me these beautiful orangish roses this weekend. And next to them, I put this pumpkin that I bought, and it's just sitting on a little table. And it's so beautiful. And it's, we live in Southern California, so this is how fall happens here. We change our colors. We don't really, it's like 80 degrees out. But that little vignette is so beautiful and so sensual for me. And it makes me feel loved and appreciated and happy. It just makes me feel happy. And so those are the ways that I've had to break the constraint that says you're materialistic, you're superficial, you're all about looks, which would be similar to internalizing feelings that sex was bad or dirty or wrong. Instead, I've had to really unravel that and just say, you know what? this is who I am and this is how I like it. And I can ascribe it to being a Libra or to just being who I am. And I think that's what you have to do for yourself, to deconstruct toxic religious messages about pleasure. You know, our bodies give us pleasure. We were born to be able to touch the pleasurable part of our bodies. I don't think that's a design flaw. And so we have to give ourselves the grace and the permission to experience that which was given to us by God, if that's what your religion believes in. While navigating my partner's lower libido during her pregnancy, I've noticed that anteros creeping in for me, bitterness. Oh, good for you. My story is that underneath this bitterness is a tender, disappointed, and grieving of a past sex life. How do I find ways to honor and connect authentically to these grieving parts of myself and communicate this with my partner without stoking my victimhood or triggering her shame for a lack of desiring sex? Well, I think that's really a beautiful question and a beautiful awareness from you, and not uncommon with many partners of women who are pregnant. And so all you can do is ask her if it's okay for you to express your desire for her without her feeling pressured to do anything about it. So you might say to her, I think your pregnant body is so sexy, or I love you, or how would you feel if we had some kind of sensual touch between us? Which may be that maybe you give her a massage, a hand and foot massage. And that what would it be like for her if you pleasured yourself in front of her, where you were connecting together with eye contact, and that you had some sort of sensuality or sexuality together. And you have to really work with that bitterness, because that is a victim stance. I mean, she's having your baby. That's a big deal that she's giving you. She's giving you a gift of life. And so to lean into the sensuality of that, her growing baby, what that belly feels like, what it feels like to touch it, how she's changing, the ways in which you see her beauty as a mother, as Mother Nature bringing this life forth. That is then a shift in your perspective, as opposed to it just being about intercourse or sexual release, which you can do on your own. But what's important is the transparency between the two of you, the agreement between the two of you, and that she feels like she is in a collaboration with you about what your personal sex life is going to look like while she's not available for sex. Because that should be a collaborative conversation. You shouldn't be doing something in secret, and she shouldn't be expecting that you have no sex life just because she doesn't feel like sex. It should be something that the two of you come up with together, and I hope that helps. Kimberly says, I appreciate how you explained starting slowly with physical sensation in your farmer's market example. Can you suggest how we can open up to Eros in that same starting with the basics way when it comes to healing love addiction? Well, I think that starts with yourself, with self-compassion around love addiction and being in reality about who you are. And the ways in which you've created pain and problems for yourself through your love addiction, where you haven't been present, where you haven't been grounded, where you haven't brought the best of you, that you've brought the most wounded part of yourselves to a relationship, the abandoned part of yourself, the hurt part, where you've wanted somebody else to heal it. So that can start with nice relationships with others, whether you're same-sex attracted or opposite-sex attracted, to have a friendship with someone. Let's say you're same-sex attracted, that you have a relationship with a male who's a friend, and you notice your tendency to want him to want you or give you something, and you stop that and you do it for yourself. You tell yourself that you look beautiful today, or you tell yourself that your smile is radiant, or you tell yourself that you are good enough, and that you are healing yourself internally, not expecting someone else to manage that abandonment dysregulation that comes up. That would be the first and foremost thing to do. And then you watch yourself in the same way this person is watching their resentment about their pregnant wife. We have to be our best examiners. We have to be good scientists and watch what's going on internally in terms of how we feel, what kind of visceral reaction we're having, in other words, what we're noticing about whether there's tightness in our chest or a feeling of sick to stomach or feeling shame about something. And then we have to intervene on it. If you're in recovery, then you use your program to intervene on that. And you start to make yourself better so that when you meet someone, they're just another log on the bonfire. They're not the main event. You're not desperate to get something going, but that you are filled with this feeling of love and eros yourself. So I'm not sure about the time here. I want to sort of look back at the healthy sex acts now in Mirror of Intimacy. The one was the question about, do you let eros or anteros rule your love life? The next one is to imagine your own personal eros. Who is your god or goddess of love? What do they look like? What qualities do you endow the conscious living energy that rules your love life? And I think that's important. And if you're inclined, for those of you that might be artists, to draw, what does eros look like for you? Or what is your imagination of eros? Is it a winged god or goddess? Is it someone that looks like Adonis or like Aphrodite? What does this love energy look like for you? And then invite the ideals of your healthiest love god or goddess to illuminate the world. So my ideals of my love god are strength and desire and power and beauty and sensuality. Then how do I state that intention every day to invite that love god into my life so that I walk with those qualities every day? So when I see someone, whether it's male or female, I see their beauty and I say, wow, you look beautiful today. Or I just, oh, you got a haircut, you look so sexy. Or that dress is stunning on you. There's a generosity of your love coming towards those you meet. And it's not phony or contrived or made up. It's a real feeling that you have internally, a feeling where you are sort of spewing your eros everywhere that you go. And then try to see beyond the veil of superficial appearances and glimpse the invisible, uniting the spirit of intimate love with others. So see beyond the concrete, see energies, if you will, look at the implicit. You know when you see someone and you think they look radiant, or when you see someone and you think, oh, wow, they look tired, or they don't look so well today. We see those cues all the time. We generally just don't comment on them, especially when we have an opportunity to make a compliment. We might notice it if somebody's really sad or struggling, but not when we're saying, oh my gosh, you look amazing, or what you're doing is amazing. So I will leave you with this thought today about eros: to be your own best lover, as I've mentioned before, to fill yourself with the erotic, with the divine, and to give it away generously to all those you meet and see how it comes back to you. So I hope October is a loving month for you, that you stay safe as usual, and I look forward to seeing you in November.